We're live. Good evening, everyone, and we are back once again to discuss War Between the Land and the Sea. Now we'll be talking about parts 3 and 4, which I believe we double check with the titles where that was: The Deep and The Witch of the Waterfall. Um, Interesting combo punches going on in this last couple of parts, but I want to hear your guys' takes on it. So I'm going to go. Let's start with William this time. Go on ahead, William.
I started last time too.
Oh,
um,
you did?
hey now,
Uh,
let's make it quick. Quick opening. These two pawns settle a lot of questions that we not some questions we had last week about about certain relationships and stuff like that. So that settles that thing once and for all. But the one thing that's unusual is that the next episode is the finale, so it's only one episode. So that's a lot of things that has to be sort of like solved. So I don't know how much what is the time of that episode is going to be to be able to do something because Kate Smith got to get and solve the assassination attempt. Um, of course, Barkley and his dilemma, you know, with Salt, and of course Salt with her own people and how that's going to be solved. So it's a good these two parts it was much better. In my opinion, was much better than the first two episodes. But of course, there's a lot of questions that needs to be solved. So I'm going to say that as an opening statement, and I'll tell you more about what happens later on.
okay, DWC.
All right. So my thoughts for the deep and to watch the waterfall. And so we begin this week with two new episodes. One that took a while to get going, but leading to another where everything happened. Well, overall, the deep was hard to get into as the whole thing took place in one confined location, which is notoriously a hard setting to write for. That doesn't mean there weren't good points, particularly how Barkley was allowed to show his emotions to the point he was able to cry in front of his family and show how hard it has been for him, something that is slowly becoming more common for men in TV, and showing the blossoming relationship between Barkley and Salt. Unfortunately, it still suffered from the overly cartoonish villains of the show, with the generals and Sir Keith. It was, however, more than made up for with the shock ending, with the bombing of Homo Aqua and the death of Colonel Ibrahim. And to anyone who thought him and Kate getting together was a bad idea, well, clearly so did the writers, and they wanted to show why. The Witch of the Waterfall continues this trajectory by demonstrating what fear and fake news can do to people. With Kate now a different person from grief, and everyone convinced Salt is guilty, resulting in her and Barkley going on the run, the whole tone has now got more tense, while at the same time you're happy to see how much love between Barkley and Salt is blossoming. The almost gut-wrenching part, however, was Barkley being betrayed, and though it wasn't explicitly said, it somewhat came across as if it was Kirby that betrayed him, something that you didn't originally get the impression they would do. And with the standoff on the bridge between British troops and units, all Salt can do is screech and jump in the river after saying the moment she hits the water, Homo Aqua will find her and punish her. Let's completely ignore that Barkley helped her escape from the container by dropping her in the river. Also, on the topic of Salt's screech, did anyone else notice that the troops, unit, the general, and Kate were all affected by the sound and in pain, but Barkley wasn't? Did Salt do something to him? With Barkley now in custody and Homo Aqua threatening to turn Earth to rust, everything is looking to get exciting for the final. And as Salt and Barkley are very much on the Romeo and Juliet of this show, let's hope it doesn't end like that famous play.
Yeah, there's a few things that disturb me about this whole thing. For one, who picked the team to go down, and how did a guy with stage 4 pancreatic cancer get rated healthy enough to go on this expedition in the first place. Also, wasn't anybody checking for contraband at all? Didn't anyone think it's funny that, oh, look, I've got a globe. Nobody scans the globe. Nobody checks the globe. No, given the situation, I'm sorry, but you're going to be alone with this guy in a bell going down. It's like they should have been a little bit more thorough on the screening. Plus, like I said, how does a guy with stage 4 pancreatic cancer suddenly healthy enough to go on this expedition when they're running everybody else through these physical drills, all this training and all that to go on this, go down there? I died laughing because they're teaching them how to use scuba gear. It's like, guys, if something goes wrong, and I believe this is at 5 miles down, if I had the depth correct, you're not swimming out to the surface. You will be a pile of goo, no bigger probably than a quarter, within a thousandth of a second, literally. For you folks, who want to know how I know this, very simple. When the Titan, which was the Ocean Gate expedition submarine that imploded, it literally happened within a thousandth of a second. Sadly, all those people were dead literally before their brain even had a chance to register something happened. And like I said, when that bubble burst, or however they did it with the water, coming in, it would not have been just rushing in like it's a wave. It would literally come like that. Not even a second, and they're all gone. All right. And that's another thing. I want to know what Barkley, what she did to Barkley, that he's suddenly surviving at 5 miles down, which I believe was the depth they were in. Am I correct? For this expedition, that big trench they went into. Okay, because sometimes my brain fuzzes out on me.
Yeah, it was at least five, that deep.
But it's like, she must have done something to his chemistry just to survive at that depth, because, like I said, anybody who's remotely human would have been squashed flatter than a bug within a second from all directions, just because of the massive amount of pressure. Plus, I'm trying to figure out where they got 2 hours and 19 minutes to dive 5 miles down. It takes them like 2.5 hours just to get down to the Titanic, and it's like around 2 miles-ish down. So it would have been a bit longer than that, but I agree with you on the setting. It's a tricky setting to work with when you have a majority, your basic character trapped in this, bell. Well, it's not really a bell. It was a big sphere. I always think of diving bells. That's why it gets stuck in my head. But now you've got to make up for all this time of these guys being in this thing, because you don't want to just jump cut, to a thing, come back, go, oh, they're there. You want to build that suspense as they're going down. You have the one guy claiming the freak out and all that. Is that water? Wait, how's that water? It's condensation, man. So you want to build that suspense, because when they do those deep diving expeditions, the part you never get to hear, you always get to see the nifty little videos of them down there, on the bottom doing their scans, but you never hear all the sounds of the cavitating and all that stuff as these things go down. It's really, really scary if you're not used to it, because you hear all that pressure building on that hull and all that, and it increases as you go down. So things are going to groan, things are like, so they did try to capture that, and they did all right with that bit. Okay, and of course, now we're back to the romance angle. Now we've got Salt and Barkley are obviously starting to develop a relationship. It's like, talk about weird long-distance love affairs. Now, unless she's going to turn Barkley into a merman or whatever it is it works, or how that works, I don't know.
How's that possible?
It's going to be kind of a tricky relationship. But, of course, things have gone off the deep end, and I believe, I could have swore me or someone else on the panel, we pretty much predicted the Colonel was dead meat. Because they were building that relationship up and all that, and I think they needed to have something that would drive Kate over the edge. So I think we all kind of knew that the Colonel life expectancy went down quite a bit. The manner in which he lost his life was, but at least he did die saving Kate. But still, very dramatic. It's had a very profound effect on her character, as we all know, and very dramatic moment there. But how are they going to resolve all this? That's interesting. I love the clever title he came up for the last bit, The End of the War. But once again, before we move on, I have to emphasize, they have way, way, way overpowered the Sea Devils. Because now they're saying all I got to do is come up, snap my fingers, wave my funky rod, and oh, Rust is going to eat all your stuff. I'm like, if they could do all this stuff, why are they negotiating?
Well,
in the first place, they could easy wipe mankind out.
But
all they got to do is wipe out all the power generators with this Rust thing or whatever, and everybody, the second they realize they can't post a TikTok or read their X anymore, they're going to rip at each other's throats.
But here's a funny question: if they could turn all that to Rust, why didn't they do that with all the trash that was under the water?
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. I don't get it. If they're having such a problem with mankind and mankind's trash, I'm sorry, DWC. Go ahead. I was ranting.
Well, they do actually say one person during the cabinet meeting. I don't know whether her character was meant to be an MP or not, but she actually makes the point: if Homo Aqua wanted to do that, they would have done. And I think that's the point. The point is they don't want to actually wipe out mankind. They do want to find a resolution to this.
But you see, that's the other point. It brings me back to RTD hasn't done any damn research at all. Because by this point, both the Silurians and the Sea Devils have been effed over by mankind how many times? And not to mention, again, if you do stick to the timeline, they're going to do it again in the future. In Warriors of the Deep.
But that's where I come.
But see what I mean? Why are they giving mankind so much slack all of a sudden?
But that's where I get to the point again. From they actually did highlight in the first episode. It's the first time we've seen one like this. When a line comes up like that, I always get the impression this is a different kind of a subspecies of the alien we've seen before. We've seen the Silurians change over time, and the idea was meant to be that they were a different kind. Sort of implied they were a different kind of Silurian. I get the impression this is a different kind of Homo Aqua that has a very different idea of what they want.
Okay, Philip had a question. I didn't understand the bullet hit Ibrahim. When it's because what happened was he literally stepped in and threw her aside as the bullet was coming in. Kate, a bit shorter than him, and the bullet was probably coming from a slightly downhill trajectory. And in that, he literally got Kate out of the way the instant before bullet boom right down into the chest where her head was. So it's not that unbelievable. I just want to answer Philip's question. Like I said, they're way overpowered. That's what I mean. It's like, why are we negotiating with these ape-descended primitives? You had factions like this before within that community. We saw it in the very first Silurian episode where you had two different factions. Plus, I'm assuming they would have the same thing going on with, the Sea Devils. I hate using Homo Aqua. I'm sorry. It just still sounds awkward to me. But it's like, why are they negotiating? Why do they want to live in peace with us? We've already demonstrated how many times before that mankind is not trustworthy. And like I said, if they had all these abilities, they would be dictating terms. They would not be negotiating. Like I said, all they have to do is drop that plastic. All right, scare the crap out of everybody. Then, also, like I said, I don't like the fact they got them like doing all these Aquaman powers or just like the creatures from the abyss. This is a way overpowered enemy. At the end of the day, they're the ones running the table. I don't even know why they're negotiating because, if you don't do what we want, we're going to do this. Well, okay, that's a real common ground to negotiate from.
Well, that's why they gave them the ultimatum. They got get me salt, and you have 4 years to solve your problem, and we don't care. You got that much time.
Exactly, but you know how we are, mankind. We're never going to solve it, especially not in 4 years, and they know that. Like I said, now and also, oh God, here's another thing I can't say with a serious face because Tide, really. You named your male protagonist after a frickin' laundry detergent? I'm sorry, that's all I think of when I hear Tide. Wise moms choose Tide to clean up. It's like.
Well, I'd say that's a very American thing because I don't think we have that brand over here.
I'm sorry. It's just, being from America, I hear Tide, I think of laundry detergent. Okay.
Well, Bobby meant because of the sea tide. That's why.
Yeah, I know. He probably meant Tides of the Sea, but still, it's like I keep picturing him there with the damn Tide, laundry detergent logo on his chest. Hello, I'm Tide. Okay, it keeps popping into my head. But so far, like I said, it's this whole thing where the Sea Devils are able to do all this. It unravels the whole point of there being any negotiation in the first place. Because if you don't do what they want you to do, they're going to make you do it. So why didn't they just skip to make them do it in the first place? Like I said, it's just the way my brain works. Like I said, maybe everyone else has another view of it, but to me, right there, this whole thing's starting to unravel. Because
the funny thing is, I don't understand why the Sea Devils appear. I mean, we see it that they first appear, you say, in the UK, and then other ones arise all over the world. But we haven't seen the other representatives from the other parts of the world talking at all.
I'll agree with you. That has been something that's been somewhat confusing me. Although at the same time, they made it very clear they wanted to speak to Barclay, so maybe just being at having it all in the UK made more sense for them.
Yeah. I am still loving, though, Russell Tovey's portrayal of Barclay. Also, I'm sorry, I don't want to try to pronounce the young lady's name because I know I'll butcher it. I'm not any good with names at all normally. So the young lady who's playing Salt, she's also doing a fantastic job. I got to say that much. Both the leads are very well acted. Everyone's actually doing a pretty good job, acting wise.
Oh yeah.
So I can't complain there at all. The performances are pretty damn good. But like I said, it's just the story for me is just slowly unraveling because it's like if you had all these abilities and now you're going to dictate terms, why did you even bother negotiating? Because if we don't do what you want us to do, you can literally turn our shit off. It's one good wave of rust, there goes generators, hydroelectric power, there goes, oh God, you don't know what happened with rust would do to a nuclear containment facility. It's like, ugh.
I'm a big shock that the Sea Devils did not ask Barclay or Kate Stewart about it. Maybe the doctor should have come in as a representative too, since they had met the doctor a bunch of times.
Well, the thing is I think, like I said, I'm beginning to agree with a lot of people. They kind of knew, I think, that things were going to be kind of screwed up because they're waiting for the Disney decision. I don't think, and I think if Shooty decided to stay or not was probably going to depend on what was going on with that whole decision. So I think that's why they said, okay, we're going to leave the doctor out of this just in case. We do have that situation where, the actor or whatever is not available, or we're in between doctors, depending on the situation. And that's why I think they so you could get plenty of mentions, but I don't know if we see anything even remotely resembling the doctor, I'll be shocked. But at the same time, he is telling us when this thing comes to an end, be sure to watch the credits or something like that because they're supposed to throw some stuff in it. We all to tidy things up, I guess.
Yeah, Confused Adipose actually made a point about that. He thinks he might know what it is now. Apparently, Rusty Davis has explicitly said, no, Billy Piper is not appearing, or Judy, the Doctor is not appearing. But Confused Adipose was able to find the actual in order cast list, and it turns out at the very bottom is a person whose character is apparently a psychiatrist. So he's suspecting that what the post-credit scene is Kate going into therapy.
Yeah, it could be that too. She's been through a lot. Especially in this particular series, and plus, come on, I'm in charge of the organization that defends the world, from extraterrestrial threats. That's going to be a little stressful, So, yeah, Philip, I think we brought that up before that the Thames River is dirty, yet the tank was filled with it. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, how dirty the river is. I think DWC brought that up a couple times.
Yeah.
So.
It is a notably filthy river, and yet they supposedly got rid of all the rubbish from the rivers and the seas.
Maybe they ran it through a filter first, Phil. I don't know. So either way, like I said, we have to just sit down, I guess, and wait to see how the denouement this particular thing goes, and then we'll make our final decision. I'll make my final really decision on how the story went all together. So I'm not throwing everything aside or anything. It's just I want to see how he ties this up. Which we'll find out next week.
You got any prediction how it's going to end? How it's going to end? You got any prediction how it's going to end tomorrow?
I don't really want to know because given the fact that he's completely fumbled the football on the 1 yard line on his last two series enders. But at the same time, Pete Matigue's in there.
But
And
he's not writing all the stories.
Pete Matigue's been doing pretty well with a lot of things and all that. Plus, like I said, so far they've been doing okay on the scripts. It's just they've way overpowered the enemy, and that's what's frustrating me. It's like when you have an enemy that powerful, why would there even be a negotiation?
Is there a rumor that he might be the next showrunner?
That's a rumor. Like I said, every time you ever write, like I said, everybody's been jumping up and down because Moffat, of course, had written a few great episodes for RTD, and he became the showrunner. And trust me, I think there's a part of him that wishes he could surgically remove some of that memory from his mind. Given how well he was treated.
I think on Williams' point of any predictions of how it's going to end, I don't know how it's going to end, but Ellie Littlechild on Who Culture is suspecting that the whole giant fish tank that Homo Aqua had to be in when at the building for the negotiations, she thinks that tank is pretty much been there just so it can burst in the last episode. And that would be exciting.
The way you gotta end again, Kate got to deal with those people who try to assassinate her, including the PM, because he was in on it too. And of course, Salt got to deal with her people. So whether they reconcile or she has to get banished, that's the thing. Now for Barkley, he has to say either goodbye to Salt or goodbye to his family and be with Salt, or like you said, DWC, like Romeo and Juliet, they both they both bite the bullet.
It'll end with a hybrid egg, says Philip.
That'd be weird.
At this point, like I said, nothing surprising. Like I said, Pete Matigue's doing pretty well, but like I said, I'm afraid. Please I hope they kept RTD well away from this finale, because I don't know. It just seems like he fizzled out the last couple series finales on the main show, and I just want this thing to stick the landing and kind of have a good resolution, Of course, that will air tomorrow. Of course, our review of it will be next Saturday. So, all I can say is I'm looking forward to see how they're going to tie this up, because then we're going to sit down and we're going to do our ratings of the whole thing overall, which episodes we like the best, which ones we felt, and all that. We're going to go into each individual episode rating-wise on next week's podcast. So, anything else, guys, before we close up shop?
Just that it was a bit of a surprise to see Sir Keith get assassinated quite so quickly in the 4th episode.
Plus, I got to go into that thing about what did they think they were going to accomplish by killing Kate? Because if she dies, it pretty much looks like Bingham's going to take over. And if they think Bingham's going to play ball, they got a whole nother, ball of marbles there.
Actually, that is another thing to point out, because she was being assassinated by something called the Institute. There was a name before that. I couldn't remember what it was. I didn't write that down. But one thing that I did take note of was that it was an organization that was, funded by billionaires, but also believed in Great Replacement, the Great Replacement theory. And now, in this context, they're talking about the idea of the Great Replacement of Homo Aqua of humanity with Homo Aqua. So let me just point out that's a real thing, by the way. Great Replacement theory. That's a far right conspiracy theory that immigration is just a plan to get everyone who's non-white to impregnate our white women and get rid of the white race.
Yeah, I've heard crazier things out there. So it doesn't surprise me. My favorite one I still die laughing to is the haunted mummy case that was on the Titanic that made it sink.
But I'm just intrigued that Russell really went there, did he?
Yeah. Or the fact that Titanic was actually the Olympic and they switched ships, to get rid of the Olympic, because they couldn't insure it or something. Like I said, it's, I've heard some really crazy ones out there in my lifetime. So, well, folks, like I said, I think we're going to close up shop for this one. Please be sure to join us next week when we, go over the finale. We'll sit down, have a discussion about how we felt the show did overall. We'll talk about how we rated the chapters and things like that. So be sure to join us then. But until then, everybody, please enjoy. By the time we see you next time, it'll be Christmas. So enjoy the holidays. Take care. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you all on the flip side.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.